What does Saturday need to look like for Payton Thorne?
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zach Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. It's a War Rapport Wednesday. Mike G of the War Rapport hanging out with us. Mike, let's assume Payton starts on Saturday, which I don't think is a crazy assumption. If I had to guess.
Sounds like he's going to start.
Yeah, right. But there's definitely a bunch of chatter about, okay, what can Hugh Freeze do to test him or to learn against learn more about how Payton Thorne handles adversity and pressure against this New Mexico team. What do you want to see from him on Saturday? Is there anything he can do Saturday that makes you say, okay, I feel better now than I did a few days ago?
The answer to that question, which we've asked this repeatedly over the last week, Zach, is no. But for the sake of argument, I will say this. After talking to Aaron Murray, former Georgia quarterback and current ESPN analyst, about what went wrong with the passing game. How do you fix this in season? Right. And, Hugh Freeze said during the press conference, it's hard not to play a guy who's consistently the best player in practice. But, Charlie Five and I talked about this. Are we basing this on practice now? You've got enough game tape on Payton to know what it's going to look like in game. So Saturday, at the very least, you want to see mistake-free football. You want to see clean reads. One of the things that Aaron talked about was not holding on to the ball. There were a couple times on Saturday where Payton left his offensive line hanging out to dry, Zach, where he could have gotten the ball out. Now, could the line have done a better job protecting? Sure. But we've talked about the time to throw metric that Pro Football Focus keeps, and how significant that is when you look at the better quarterbacks in our league over the last few years. If you're holding the ball beyond 3 seconds in this league, usually it doesn't lead to anything good, Zach. And on that particular play where he got hit and he threw that interception, he was past 3 seconds on that one. And, Keandre Lambert-Smith was running in wide open green grass. You want to see him pull the trigger and make that throw. Aaron says, and Payton was looking at him. It's not like he was looking at another target and somebody was running open. It's like, throw the ball. Throw the ball. He's there. Aaron says that's a mixture of just mental processing and film review. So when they go back and they look at the film and they say, hey, look, why didn't you throw the ball there? What's not clicking at this point? Are we not teaching it right? Like Hugh Freeze says, at this point, I think that everything has to be up for evaluation. Maybe it's not being taught right. That's not something that people want to hear. But if this guy isn't getting it, but you keep playing him, eventually, the issue may be you. And I think the head coach needs to do something here. Well,
it sounds like that conversation is certainly being had as far as looking at how they're teaching. And also, is Payton the starting quarterback the rest of the way? The fact of the matter is, every time we've seen this type of situation at Auburn since Payton Thorne has been here, Hugh Freeze has done everything to quickly shut down any sort of drama or any sort of quarterback controversy. And he didn't do that on Monday. He wouldn't name a starter, and it kind of continued into Tiger talk Monday night. So I do think there's a chance that they are considering this. It sounds like Hank got more reps in practice this week than he typically does, which kind of lines up with everything Freeze is saying. Do you think it's a legitimate battle, Mike, or do you think they're using Hank and giving him more reps as, let's get him ready just in case, but also let's put some pressure on Thorne here?
I think it's the latter.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I think that you're essentially trying to get Hank Brown ready in case you need him. Here's why I think this is really unfair to Hank Brown, right? Waiting to pull the trigger. New Mexico is your last kind of easy litmus test before you hit SEC play. I don't know how much of the other teams you've watched, Zach, but Arkansas looks a little better than we thought. Now, I know they lost a close win against Oklahoma State in overtime.
Their offense specifically, their defense, I'm not entirely sure on, but their offense looks way better than I thought.
Taylor Green is playing pretty good football right now.
They're running back to Jaquindon. His last name's slipping, but like he's pretty dynamic as well. So.
Yeah, and so now what we thought was a boss game looks like a toss going in, and your season can really come off the rails in these next few games. So if Hank Brown is your guy, is it fair to him to throw him to the Wolves in SEC play and not give him a chance to get a good portion of snaps? Because look, even this is why I go back to what the previous question, Zach, about what can Payton do to make anybody feel good on Saturday. And again, it's New Mexico. You're supposed to beat them badly, and it's supposed to look good, and you're not supposed to make mistakes. So it's got to come down to the technicals, right? Like, he can afford to hold on to the ball versus New Mexico maybe and complete that pass to Keandre Lambert-Smith. This is why I like guys like Aaron Murray doing what they do, because in that film review, and I encourage everybody to go look at it, their YouTube channel is Snaps CFB_. But he's got access to all 22.
Yeah.
So he can see the entirety of the field and break down what's everybody supposed to be doing on this play. What is the quarterback seeing? And when we're reviewing broadcast film, one year we had access to all 22. It's really hard to get. They locked that thing down like Fort Knox. But he's teaching fans, look, there are a lot of things that have to be processed mentally for a play to go right sometimes. And, all it takes is one mental mistake by the quarterback, and it can blow a whole play up or throw the whole rhythm off for everybody, offensive line and receivers included. So, I don't know that this situation is necessarily fair to Hank Brown unless he gets in at halftime and then plays the rest of the second half.
Yeah, I would love for him to get some reps when the game's not like over, with starters, and it might make sense. You let Payton play the first quarter, and ideally you're up, 10-0, 14-7. I don't know. I don't know what proper expectations need to be right now on how Auburn plays against a team like New Mexico. But regardless of the score, put him, because if it's still close, then it's like, okay, like, Payton didn't score enough in the first quarter. What does that look like?
Right.
Make the change and see what happens. I think we do see that. I think we see more of Hank, and I think he plays a few more relevant snaps. But you're right. As far as timing goes, like, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense at any other point in the schedule. Like, you don't want his first start to be against Arkansas. However, like, I do think that's the second best case scenario for Hank. You don't want his first start to be Oklahoma. That's going to be an electric game. You don't want his first start to be on the road at Georgia and Athens. Then you get a bye week, and I guess that's the next best case scenario if you need to make a change. Mm-hmm. Is it fair to make a change after a road game against the number one team in college football? I don't know. I think it depends on what exactly that looks like.
I don't think that's fair, and I think you have a chance to really rattle that young man's confidence. Zach, let me just make this one last point, and this is something that I've always admired, about the more consistent programs of college football. The coaches seem to not have a hesitancy to pull the quarterback when it's time. Brian hates when I make this point, and I know it's kind of an extreme example, but you look back to that 2017 national title game, and you got a guy, Jalen Hurts, who has not lost a lot of football, maybe one game at that point. And Saban says, you know what? I know what you are at this point at halftime. So I'm going to sit you down, and I'm going to put this kid in, this true freshman.
Yeah.
And he ended up pulling out that game in epic fashion. Last year we saw Milroe sit. He ended the season as a fringe Heisman candidate. But they sat him for a game to see, because you know what? You've got a ton of tape on this guy, and you've seen him in practice, and you know what he is, right?
Yeah.
So it is to me, it just comes down to can you make this switch, right? Because you made the decision.
I want to. Yeah, let's because I do think there are some variables that are different, because I've heard that a lot this week, and there are some things that are different, and I want to discuss them, if the differences matter or not, because I don't think they do, but there is a difference here. That's coming up right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Mike G, can you imagine paying as much as possible for a ticket to a sporting event?
No, I can't.
No, you don't want to pay as much as possible.
Money.
You want to pay as little as possible.
That's
At game time, right? Yeah, game time. Look, you don't want to like compare prices. You don't want to go to one and then the other and then the other and like truly figure out like, okay, which one's actually cheapest. Game time does it for you. Game time does it for you, whether it's for football, basketball, baseball, concert, the theater, comedy, doesn't matter what it is. Game Time has you covered. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. FanDuel's America's #1 sports book. Right now, Mike G, any $5 bet at FanDuel, you get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV.
Oh, interesting.
$5? You kidding me? Are you kidding me? What a deal from our friends at FanDuel. So with any YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account. Those are free and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. Mike G of the War Rapport, thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. So when you look at the comparisons that have been popped up, Milroe getting, sitting a game last year for Alabama, or when they pulled Jalen Hurts for Tua in the national championship game.
Hell, even Bo got pulled for TJ for a half, right?
Yeah, and I think that's probably the cleanest example for sure. It wasn't an entire game, but I do think there was always more buzz around the guys that they were getting pulled for. Like Alabama fans were clamoring for Tua before Tua even ever stepped foot on campus. Sure. Hank Brown never got that treatment. Now, whether that recruiting process was fair or not, and he was properly rated or whatever like that, that's a whole different conversation. But I mean, I was told for years that Hank would never move up the depth chart. And here he is so close to being the starting quarterback for Auburn as a redshirt freshman. I do think you have to be able to explain the move if you're a head coach. Because if it goes wrong, you've got to be able to explain why you made the switch. I think there's enough proof in the pudding for Hugh Freeze to explain it.
Sure.
But I'm not sold that he thinks that. And to me, I think that's the disconnect.
Yeah. So going back to the differences, right, in the programs and the hype around the backups. Here's why I don't think that matters, right? All that matters is the decision that the coach made. You chose not to go after or seriously pursue a portal QB in the offseason. So when you did that, you signaled, I think my QB room is good enough to win with. We know in this league that you need 2 quarterbacks. Last year, we talked about this. Over half of the teams in the SEC went to their backup to start at least one game. A lot of them, multiple games, right? So if you don't have a guy on the roster who can get the job done in the portal and NIL era, that's on you. So when you put that faith in Hank Brown by not going after a portal QB, in my mind, I'm like, look, Hank's good enough, right? I don't want to hear that he's not good enough because that's the situation that you're in. He's got to be good enough. So then you move on to, again, coming back to the comments about being the best player in practice. And it's just, Zach, what it boils down to is, for Payton, the math isn't the same. Sure, you're judging the other guys off practice because they don't have game tape.
Right.
But Payton has the game tape, and that's how you explain that. It doesn't always work out the way that this is not talent evaluation is not a perfect science. I say this all the time. Better coaches have gotten it wrong and then made a switch.
Yeah.
So, if you're Hank Brown, you got a little shimmer of hope if you're Hugh Freeze. Yeah. Because he got into that bowl game and he looked like a seasoned vet. And look, man, Maryland was still playing at the end of that game. It's not like the game was 35-7 or something. Auburn, if they had a turnover here, or they could have gotten back in that one. They were still taking that game seriously, and Hank looked good, right? Mm-hmm. And the receivers that everybody claimed couldn't catch a cold suddenly were catching balls from Hank Brown. So,
I'm with you.
It to me, and then you've said other things too. How off was the deep ball? It was interesting during one of the more interesting things said during Tiger Talk this week was about that 4th down call where Payton threw the bomb.
Yeah.
Right. And what he was supposed to do. Yes. What he was supposed to do, Hugh was saying, was he was supposed to check that down. There was an easier throw underneath. But and I quote, Payton got greedy.
That's insane.
The decision was on that decision was squarely on him, right? So I'm like, this is again a 4th-year starter that we're talking about here, not a 2nd-year guy or 1st-year guy. You brought him in here because he's supposed to be able to know and feel the difference and make the right decisions, regardless of whether the play turns out well or not. Yeah. Right. So what you're looking at is decision making, and the decision to hold on to the ball when on that interception, and the decision to throw it way down the field. I tweeted it out, and I was like, deep shot on 4th and 2. I didn't like. I mean, regardless of the result, Zach. Right. Yeah. The decision is what I'm looking at here, and according to Hugh Freeze, Payton went outside, the authority structure to make that throw, and there was a better decision to be made. So, you're looking at that and you're saying, look, man, if I got a guy who's just not doing
which by the way, Mike, we've been talking about the offense having 5 turnovers against Cal, 4 picks by Payton. The DPI, which he got bailed out of in the end zone, like I don't think that was pass interference. Yeah, it should have been 5 probably, and you don't get that touchdown. But if somebody wants to lump in the 4th and 2 decision with all those other turnovers, like I'm not going to push back on it.
Right.
And say you're responsible for turning the ball over 6 times. Like I'm not pushing back on that.
Yeah, turnover on downs is still turnover, right?
No, it's the same outcome on it if you.
Yeah, so that's what you're using. That's what you're using to base this on, and it's all on tape. Right? Yeah, this is not some hypothetical that we're talking about here. Now, here's if you don't play Hank. You may be, hear me out, because it may not be fair to throw Hank to the Wolves in SEC play. He may feel stuck with Payton.
Yeah, I mean, you're running out of time.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and so
running out of time.
This is a kind of a do or die situation in my mind for Hugh Freeze. Now, you and I, we could both be wrong. I want to say that for our listeners. Maybe Hank comes in and he looks like Peyton Manning, no matter who the opponent is, and I would love to be having that conversation about how was this guy sitting on the bench the whole time, but hey, let's just move on from it because he's good. It's happened before.
It has happened before. Yeah. And I don't think it's like, I know you said Peyton Manning to be best case scenario, but there's a real chance that Hank comes in and he's a really solid SEC quarterback.
Yeah, the first guy's not always the best guy, right? It happens from time to time.
Yeah, and seniority is such a thing. But I mean, you see these young guys get shots all throughout the country and they pop. And I don't understand why Hank can't be one of those guys. So we'll see.
Stetson Bennett lost a job to JT Daniels, and look how JT Daniels' career turned out after that. Now, Stetson, they really stuck with him through that first year, and he was definitely a game manager. But he turned himself into a fringe Heisman candidate in year 2, and it's hard to believe that he wasn't always the best guy in that room. But they were basing it on practice, I guess, and the best guy was on the bench.
Mike G, how can people check out everything you've got going on?
Oh, man, we've got a ton. Zach, I've got Josh Pate this week. I've got Taylor Korn from the next round coming. Hey. Shouted out with me today. Charlie 5 on Mondays, breaking down press conferences. And my guy J.D. Piquel from On 3 is going to join me this week ahead of New Mexico to talk about what Auburn needs to do. So we got a great slate ahead for fans. Follow us at The War Rapport on YouTube, at The War Rapport on every social media platform.
Yep. No, that's a great lineup of guests. No question about it. Hey, like the video. Please subscribe. We'll see you next time. This has been Locked On Auburn.